We should be the most broken about the people who never move and never respond and never embrace the gift of the bride of Christ, in which we've been called to not only bear one another's burdens, but to have those around us love us enough in the spirit of gentleness to bear our burdens as well. He's created us in such a way that we need it. You may not be struggling with the false intimacy of pornography, but your jealousy and covetousness is no better. You may not be struggling with godly financial stewardship as someone else around you in your group life, but your own struggle of malicious words to your spouse, it's no better. Paul is saying, humble yourself. Every single one of us are in need of the burden-lifting community called the bride of Christ. Every one of us must face the reality of our own sinfulness. So spiritual restoration requires relationships, but second, spiritual restoration requires humility. Spiritual restoration requires humility. This really brings us back to that central verse in verse 2, that main idea of Paul's, doesn't it? It brings us back to Christ. Bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. In other words, remember how Christ fulfilled the law. Remember the cross. I'll read to you Philippians chapter 2, beginning in verse 5. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. Again, this is written to a local community, that church in Philippi, started by Lydia, a female working with purple linen, meeting under the tree somewhere. Picture that local gathering of believers. Have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus, who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself. He emptied himself, taking on the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form, he humbled himself. Remember, have this mind among yourselves. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. Our model of restoration in the local church is the ultimate picture of humility, and that's Jesus himself. Our model for restoration, where do we look to? How do we do this? We look to Jesus, and we see the humility of the greatest one who was at the highest of highs, who then emptied himself to come down to the lowest of lows and die the worst death imaginable, the most humiliating death throughout history that one could ever imagine, the excruciating death on a cross. And he did that to carry the burdens of the church. And Paul says, there's your model.